Good afternoon. Welcome to the first Hangout for We Are Strathclyde of 2017. My name's Howard Ramsey. I'm a member of the course team. I'm joined today by Associate Deputy Principal Helen Gould. I believe I may even have got your job title wrong there.
Deputy Associate Principal Learning and Teaching.
Perfect. Can I ask you to explain, Helen, what exactly your role is at the institution?
Yes, it's a rather unusual title. Basically, I report to the Vice Principal and Principal of the University in the area of learning and teaching, and specifically looking at leading strategic development of our student experience and the academic content and the overarching aspects of education here at Strathclyde.
Okay, great. I know you're very aware of the course and you've been involved in it over the past year. We also, you very kindly let us film you for the introduction to each of the weeks of the course. What we've seen this week is a really diverse range of students incoming into the first year at Strathclyde, and I imagine this is pretty typical. Do you have any thoughts about that in all the colours of the current intake? Absolutely.
The intake into Strathclyde is very diverse in all sorts of different dimensions of diversity. Part of that's reflected in the fact that Strathclyde is an international university, so we draw our student population from across the globe. Lots of Scottish students, of course, but across the rest of the UK, across Europe and internationally. Different courses will have different particular makeups depending on the type of course it is. But I think here at Strathclyde we really value that diversity, and I think it brings an extra thing to the educational experience you get, because the people that you're sharing the experience in classrooms and your education with bring different perspectives, and these can be incredibly powerful to help you develop and understand. So certainly diversity is something that we intend to have here, and is a very welcome aspect to it. And there's lots of different, even within people that you think on paper might be very similar, are quite often very different. So even for our Scottish students, some of them, quite a lot of them, will be living at home, some will be moving away from the home for the first time. Everybody has a very different experience and a different background, but hopefully you'll find Strathclyde quite supportive regardless of your particular circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Something that I is possibly worth mentioning, because it's related to some of the student comments that were made in response to the first discussion topic, which is what is a university, is that a lot of the senior staff at Strathclyde, perhaps unusually in universities, were students at the university.
Yes.
Possibly some time ago, but they are including the principal and yourself, Helen, I understand.
Yes, I came here in the 80s as an undergraduate, and I also did a postgraduate degree here as well, and that's actually, there's quite a lot of Strathclyde staff who have a degree from here, maybe will be a postgraduate degree, but have a degree from here, including the principal. I think he very much feels he's a Strathclyder through and through. And actually also, in terms of the dimensions of the staff, quite a lot of the staff here at Strathclyde are first in their generation to go to university. And I think that also sort of changes the perspective that you perhaps bring to it.
Absolutely. So these comments that I was talking about, we have one in response to what is a university. Mark Brown heard what members of staff said in response to this question and said, what surprised me about what the staff said was the emphasis behind university being a community. Do you have any response to that?
Absolutely. You are not in isolation, you're joining a learning community, and ultimately that's what university is about, whether you're a member of the staff or a student in one of the courses. You're about furthering knowledge and learning, and people don't do that on their own. They do that either basing their developments on work that's done previously or as part of teams. It is all very much about a community that has similar objectives and similar values, that values that advancement of knowledge. So that permeates from staff all the way through down into the student courses. You learn and will learn as part of a peer group, as part of a cohort, and you will gain an enormous amount out of the experience of others. There's entire educational setups like our executive education, which is based around what the people in the room are bringing into that educational experience. So learning isn't an isolated activity, it's learning is part of the experience that you have with a unique group of people with their unique perspective. So that permeates all different aspects outside of the classroom as well. And I think certainly for me, university is also about the opportunities that you have to get involved and to do different things. It's not just about what's in that classroom and passing a particular class. It's also about developing yourself too.
Okay, that's interesting, because it almost exactly mirrors another of the student comments, which was from a Norwegian student, and forgive me if I get the pronunciation slightly wrong here. It's Tina Bigness, who said, "I forgot the fun aspect of university. Other than that, my answer is very similar to what I said myself, which is that university is not only about the academic aspect, but also about the aspect of growing as a person."
Absolutely. I think fun is really important, and I don't know whether or not for a lot of students it's perhaps the experience of sitting your exams that maybe leach some of the fun out of the learning experience, but certainly we know, and it's very clear from research in learning areas, that having fun while you learn is the most effective way to learn. So we as staff, we don't want to go in and be bored in a classroom, so we want to make it as enjoyable as possible. So hopefully you're now going to be studying subjects that you are really motivated to study, and that makes it much easier to have fun. But we are mindful that you have to enjoy yourself. You don't want to be going through your university education as a slog. You want that to be enjoyable, and that's something that we are very much aware of when we're doing that. So it's about more than learning, it's about developing yourself. For me, one of the big things that you gain out of a university education is the ability to understand how you learn most effectively. This is just the start of the rest of your careers. So you're going to be learning your whole life. And what university can provide for you is an opportunity to understand more about yourself and how to help yourself learn more effectively while you're here, but also very importantly for the rest of your career.
Great, thanks very much. Related to that was the question we asked students to answer, which is, what is a successful student? Okay. Now, an interesting comment came in from Ben Rapson, who said, "What I had not thought of previously was the importance that peer groups can play in the success of an individual." Can you say anything around that, about the other people studying with you?
Yes, I think Ben has got a key point there. People learn, we are social beings, and we learn effectively when you feel supported, and your peer network is incredibly important for you to do that. And that's, I think, also when you're starting university, one of the more daunting aspects of it. I'm sure all of you will deal with the theoretical material in the class, etc. You probably have a reasonable amount of confidence, particularly given the qualifications that you'll have achieved, to be able to cope with that. I think the uncertainty for most of us when we walk into a new situation like this is how you're going to get on with the rest of the cohort. It's those sorts of aspects that tend to make people more anxious. And if you can have a successful group of people around you that are supporting you in your learning, we know and you know that that's going to make it more effective. But everyone's coming in with that same attitude. Everyone has the same anxieties and recognises that you want to get that effective team around you. Even explaining something to someone else will help your own understanding, and also having somebody else able to explain something to you that you're not quite as clear on is incredibly powerful. But it also it's that team support, certainly from my own experience, that helps get you through the difficult points. So when it is quite hard and you're working on perhaps something that you are finding very challenging, sharing that experience with other people who are also finding it challenging can help keep you going through that. So there are lots of different dimensions to peer support, but it is very important.
And I think what's interesting is that peer support works in two sort of ways. There's the informal way, so it's not designed, it's not set up and structured. You just have to make your own connections with your own peers. But what I didn't experience at university, which I understand has changed for many disciplines, particularly perhaps from your own, from the business school, Helen, it's a more formal, structured type of collaboration between students. Group work is used now when it wasn't when I was a student. Yeah,
you will be hard pressed to avoid group work. But then in today's employment, there are very, very few roles that don't involve some sort of working with a team. And that's reflected in the kinds of assessments and activities. And I think quite a lot of the fun comes out of that as well, working in a group rather than working on your own. Here at Strathclyde, we put an enormous emphasis on this aspect of useful learning. And because of that, you'll find that quite a lot of the assessment is around you having understood the theory, but then you putting that into practice. And quite frequently, the most effective way to do that is through group projects. So you'll have quite a lot of formal ways where you're working with the team. You'll find you have different experiences in teams, different types of styles that people have, and you'll also learn quite a lot about what you're most comfortable with. What I would say is remember that you are an active agent in that team. So you have an influence on how that team works. So you're not a recipient of the experience, you're forming that experience. And that is incredibly valuable from an employer's point of view. And one of the things that they value out of the Strathclyde education is the skill set that you're going to gain over your time in university in working effectively within that team context.
Okay, great. Thinking back to your own time as an undergraduate, you said it was 1980, so I'm not giving anything away there.
Some time ago.
If you were able to speak to yourself going into your first year at university, Strathclyde as an undergraduate, if you had 2 pieces of advice for yourself, can you think what they might be? Guess.
Ask questions. I didn't. I just sat wondering quite a lot, and then maybe mentioned it to somebody else, but I very rarely actually asked the person who was most likely to be able to give me an accurate answer. Staff welcome questions, staff in all of the different areas of the university, and that's something I just didn't realise. It was also a confidence thing, I think, for me, that I just didn't, I felt quite out of my depth, to be honest, and just kind of wandered through things rather than actually being very proactive about it. And I think if I'd had a bit more confidence and realised that staff are expecting people to ask questions, that it's not anything unusual and that it's absolutely fine, and really there isn't a stupid question. It's about you not knowing a particular piece of information. So I would have gone better. I think it would have been a more comfortable experience and more enjoyable if I'd asked more questions, because then I would have felt certain. Rather than wondering if I was doing the right thing, I would have been confident that I was doing the right thing. And the other aspect, I think, is don't be too afraid of being uncomfortable. I tried to avoid anything that made me feel uncomfortable. For example, I didn't like speaking in front of people and speaking in front of the class. It seems somewhat ironic now. However, at the time, I was paralysed with fear over the whole thing, and I felt that that was something to avoid rather than to actually embrace and actually make myself a little bit uncomfortable, and that it's actually quite healthy to get a little bit outside of your comfort zone, because then it becomes more comfortable for you. And I think that aspect of self-development took me quite a while as an undergraduate to get a handle on, and I wished that I had accepted being uncomfortable and pushed myself a bit more to start off with.
That's really interesting, because those in some ways are related. If there was discomfort in asking questions.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, definitely. That was my experience.
Okay, great. Our time's more or less up now, actually, for this week. That was great.
That was very quick.
Helen, thank you very much for coming along and responding to these points. Thank you for those who are watching now and will watch later, and good luck with week two, and we'll be back again next week.
Yeah, have a fantastic time. I hope you're enjoying the course so far.